So one of the most basic skill requirement of any living organism is the ability to reproduce. Means an organism needs to create its numerous copies in course of time so that the continuation of the species can be maintained. So when we talk about reproduction, it actually we are trying to mean that an organism which is existing, its way of procreation of its form, so that numerous copies of them can continue to exist in that particular given space, and that particular existence is what is going to lead to we can say that the ability or that creation of the different particular individual of that particular organism, and this that is what is going to maintain the continuation or existence of the species. Now, talking about reproduction, it is clearly the way of procreation of life. Means it's actually a way by which one individual can make a copy of it, or can make another individual who has got the features similar to that first one. And that feature, it has been noticed in, or it is actually is going on with every single type of organism, be that a single cell organism or be that a multicellular organism. Just the ways and forms and everything is quite different. Now when we talk about like this picture that I've drawn here, this representation is of that of the reproduction in course of a single cell organism, where a single cell organism, you are going to find that the single cell organism is going to replicate itself. Means it's simply going to produce its copy, numerous copies, one after another, and that way numerous copies of that particular individual will be created, each having the exact same feature of that of the first one. So from here these two individuals are created, from these two more are created, and so on and so forth. Now if you can notice here, actually there is like in this particular case especially, I have made a little reduction in size, isn't it? Means the size of this organism, in this case I did not do anything like that, but right here I actually have reduced it, because considering the concept of conservation of mass, definitely the like new mass cannot be created, isn't it? Whatever existing masses are there, that will be used to express whatever the next one is going to be produced. So if you follow that particular concept and we find that the cell is of particular this size, then the two new individuals that are going to form, the two new individuals are going to be formed of half of the content of whatever is present here, isn't it? So that means the size is definitely going to get reduced. Now if that particular feature continue, then we will find that every single of those cells are going to produce the new cells, let's say that as the daughter cells, which will be half the size of the parent, the original one, right? Now if that happen, means every single process, every single step of reproduction, it is actually reducing the size of the cell. So in total we may find that there will be a situation, let's say after 10, like even with this diagram only we can guess that if after maybe 2 3 4 5 6 or 7 reproductive steps, maybe the cell size will be nothing more than a dot, isn't it? So if that actually happen, that means the cell is actually reducing its size, and that is definitely not going to hold every single character that this original one was possessing. It cannot. There is no space for all those things to stay there, or to process itself right there. So definitely that is not happening in the real world. In the real time scenario, something else is happening, which is actually we will find that they are going to bond, like yes, they will get reduced to half the size, but then from there it will actually grow back again. Means after reproduction there is definitely a phase of growth for the new individual. Okay, after every process or every steps of reproduction, there is definitely going to be a step of growth for the new individual that is there. Now this step of growth is actually, like, we can represent it entirely by the process of or by the terminology of lifespan. Okay, so when we talk about lifespan, it actually starts with the birth of the individual, all right, where the individual was born. Fine. So once the individual is born, so the individual is actually like it start existing there. So let's say it's of this much size. All right. Now in course of time, it will actually go through the phase of growth, which is actually considered in this particular, like considering reproduction, it will be considered as the phase of juvenile stage. Okay. So juvenile stage is actually the stage where this individual is actually growing. All right. Now after growing, it will actually grow bigger into the desired size. Then it becomes reproductively active. Reproductively active. And this stage is what is going to be called as the stage of puberty or adolescence. It is the stage where the reproductive maturity has attained, and that means this cell is now ready to take part in the process of reproduction, and thus it will do that. It will reproduce itself. Okay, reproduce and create two new cells. All right, and considering that the initial cell which is already grown bigger and all, so these two cells that will be born will be of like smaller size. All right. So now once these two cells are formed, now we are going to find that these two cells are definitely a creation of this particular cell. So it has already created whatever things are necessary for the new, like for its existence, and everything will be found in both of them. Right. Now once this stage is over, the cell will enter the phase which is known as the senescence. All right, senescence. Now the senescence stage is going to be for this individual. I'm not going to talk about this individual. Say I am representing the entire thing, like you can see here, it is in the term of like single cell organism, isn't it? But in reality, in real like single cell organism, their life is actually starting with birth. The juvenile phase means the growth phase, and then the like once it will reproduce, the two new cells are formed. The two new cells are formed from this cell only. So this cell has ceased to exist, or it has continued its existence with these two cells. All right. So that means you cannot say anything furthermore about this particular cell, because the two new cells are actually combined, like formed of this one, and it's gone completely, like merged with, or we can say it's completely within the essence of this particular two cells, right? But if we talk about an individual which has the capacity to produce an offspring which is a copy of it, but that offspring is completely new, a different individual, and the old one, the parent one, it still exists, like in the case of like multicellular organism. So we are going to find that the individual that is there, that individual, it will keep on existing. All right. Let's say this individual, let's say I'll make it structured like that. Okay, this individual is existing there, and along with it, maybe like it has grown bigger, it has become bigger enough, like it can reproduce now. Now in that particular phase, it has procreated a smaller individual now. All right, means it has created its new that baby, you can say this one is a baby, right? Now once this baby is formed, this this parent one will enter the phase of senescence. Okay, now senescence is actually a phase where the organism has lost its ability to reproduction, and also all those kind of like biochemical processes whatever were present in the organism, or which was like maintaining its life or maintaining its existence and all those biochemical processes will slowly retard itself. Okay, and slowly and eventually will come to a complete halt. And when that complete halt is there, or it attained that particular halt, we call that particular stage as the death. That will be the death of the organism. Okay, that means this organism, it is like after birth, it will actually keep on growing bigger, which is the juvenile phase, where it cannot reproduce but just will grow itself and get itself ready for the phase of reproduction. Then after that, it will simply enter the phase of reproductive maturity, or it a reproductively active stage, in which is attained by the stage of puberty, we say it, and or adolescence. And After that it will just keep on procreating life, maybe not one copy. Sometimes so many organism, multicellular organisms are there who actually produces multiple individual, isn't it? So multiple individuals are formed, whatever as many numbers are required, every like as it is capacity, maybe not one time, maybe few times, many times it can reproduce in life. Total phase of reproductive activity, it can make procreate life as many times as necessary, right? Now once that is done, it will enter the phase of senescence, where the process or the ability to reproduction will be lost, and slowly is all metabolic activities will retard. All right, so we can say ability to reproduce, it is gone, and metabolism, it is retarding. Okay, is reducing itself, means slowly getting reduced. So that particular phase is what is known as a senescence, or simple term we call it aging. All right, and then finally the play or the time when all metabolism will stop, and we call it the death of the individual. Okay, so that is what will be considered as the lifespan of every living organism. Single cell organism, it starts with the birth, then the growth, then simple reproduction, and then again this two individual will actually is entering his birth phase, and the previous one has only formed these two, so it's gone there. All right, but in case of the other organism, means multicellular organism, we will find that the phase is actually distributed in the birth, then growth, and then finally entering the reproductive maturity, where reproduction will be taking place, and then it will enter the stage of aging or senescence, finally the death, where it will cease to exist. Right, now that is what going to be the lifespan of the individual. Now talking about reproduction, actually we have reproduction process which can be like can be said like actual reproduction is of different varieties, means the procreation of the life, though it completely depend on the ability of the organism or what type of organism it is, but this procreation of life sometimes it is done by number, means single cell organism they just increase by number, or even like many multicellular organisms are there who actually just simply increases number, more and more individual it produce. Then that feature, it completely depend on the type of individual we're talking about. Okay, some can produce a large number of individual, some produces very less number of individual, some has a probability like of producing only one offspring entire year, some produces like reproduces multiple times in a single year round. So it actually varies from organism to organism depending on their types and forms, and depending on the environment. Definitely we will discuss about it in detail when those topics will be taken into consideration. At the moment, let's go with a brief understanding of the entire thing. So what we are going to find here is, like, when we talk about reproduction briefly, we can segregate the process of reproduction into asexual reproduction. Can consider, yeah, chalo, let's consider vegetative propagation, which is noticed mostly in case of plants and everything. Okay, then we can consider parthenogenesis, and finally the process of sexual reproduction. Okay, sorry, it was not in focus. Okay, so asexual reproduction, vegetative propagation, parthenogenesis, and sexual reproduction. Now talking about asexual reproduction, it is actually the individual whichever is there, it is making its copy, it's making copies. Okay, kind of like Xerox. Some way, sometimes it is considered as production of clone that is taking place, because the individual that will be formed, okay, offspring has got same feature of that of the parent. Okay, so we can write similar feature like parents. Okay, it's actually exact similar feature nearly. So that will be the type of asexual reproduction that we talk about. Okay, there is no involvement of any gamete or any special structure of anything, and it is simply like the individual that exists, it actually is creating its alternate, like a new form. So we can consider the example of binary fission in many single cell organism as the example for the asexual reproduction. Okay, now talking about vegetative propagation, it is actually its body part, means its own body part will actually grow into the new individual. Again, this is also a kind of production of clones. Sometimes it is considered as a production of soma clones, because somatic body or the vegetative body or part of the cell organism is actually forming that particular individual. Okay, so it is propagation of body part into new individual. Okay, so it is new individual. So this is what will be called the process of vegetative propagation. It's like you have a leaf, and from the leaf only a new individual will be formed. Okay, so for example, you have, like with the example of the leaf only, we can say like you have heard this name bryophyllum. This particular plant which has got its leaf, so we take the leaf, and that from the leaf only, like the new plant can be seen to like born. Okay, say from the leaf only there, that is the leaf, this is the leaf, let's say, means consider this as a leaf. All right, so from the leaf only this new bird is actually emerging, and that is vegetative propagation. Okay, there are many more processes are there, grafting and all this process is also under this. We will be discussing about every single one of them in detail later on. Then comes the process of parthenogenesis, where without any involvement of the alternate gamete, means here we actually will find that there will be involvement of gametes taking place. Okay, but gametes are not involving directly. It is like without fertilization, gametes form new individual. Okay, without like any fertilization, the gametes will form the new individual. So where do you find this? We are going to find this in the case of ants, honeybees. Okay, where the female lay eggs, which is the gamete, definitely the female gamete, but that gamete automatically grow into the new individual. Okay, the drones and all these things, they actually they are born from the gamete, but the gamete is not at all in any way like producing, like if it's fertilizing, means it's fusion of the gametes are not taking place there. It's just the gamete is only propagating itself into the full individual. Okay, that is known as the process of parthenogenesis. Finally, the process of sexual reproduction comes, where when we consider sexual reproduction, we will say that the gametic fusion will take place. Okay, means two specific cells which is known as the gametes, the gametic fusion will take place, and that gametic fusion will lead to formation of the zygote. Okay, gametic fusion to zygote formation, that is what we are going to observe, and that zygote is actually the individual we are talking about. The zygote will now grow into the full individual. Okay, and this is this process, like definitely when this process will be like sexual reproduction will be discussed in detail. There are some variations of them that exist, that will be definitely discussed with you people. Now let's give a brief idea. It is actually, this process is known as the process of syngamy. Okay, where the fusion of the gamete will take place, and finally the new individual will be formed, called syngamy. There is another method called conjugation, which is like without any involvement of gamete, there is a fusion taking place. It will be discussed definitely. So this is the one we are quite familiar with. Like in the case of mammals, it is mostly the feature that actually takes place. So the fusion of the gamete will take place, and then the individual will be produced. Okay. Now out of all of this that you are seeing here, it is the sexual reproduction which has got the ability to produce variation in the offspring. Okay, it is this one which actually creates variation. Now variation is a very important phenomenon. Why? Because with variation the chance of survival of the offspring, it increases, because maybe let's say the condition is harmful, it's bad for the organism to survive. Now at that particular moment, if there is like the same feature with which the parent was existing, this new environment will actually create the same kind of hazard for the newborn, and the newborn cannot survive, cannot adapt. It doesn't have the time or ability to adapt to it, right? Well, which the parent they actually had. Now, due to that, the individual, there's a good chance that the individual will actually die. Now, that is definitely not acceptable for the existence of the species. For that, whenever they are entering the process of sexual reproduction, there is involvement of two parents that will be noticed here, because all of these cases there is no involvement of any second individual. Here only a single individual, like all of them are coming out from, right? But in this case there is this involvement of two parents, the male and the female, as it is considered, and their gametes that are going to form, the gametes are going to fuse together to form the zygote, the new individual. Now if that is taking place, so we can say that the features of two parents are actually mixing here, and if features of two different parents with two different kind of adaptation and all is giving birth to a new individual, there's a good chance the new individual will have the features from both of them, and maybe is better suited to survive that situation. Not only that, there is actually a phenomenon of crossing over, if you remember from the previous classes, crossing over. Now that crossing over step is where you can that the genetic features, they intermix, they recombine, and they form new features, which is like during the formation of gamete it takes place, right? And that crossing over also creates a large amount of variation. Now altogether, all this variation is considered as good for the individual, because it may bring about good variations which may lead to better chance of survival for the of the newborn. So that's why the sexual reproduction is much more preferred when there is adversity in the condition, and this is much more preferred for those individuals or those type of organism where the environmental factor is not creating that much of harshness or that much of adversities. And that's why these are mostly found in more simpler type of organism, though actually in simpler organism both the features can exist. Many of them are there where both sexual and asexual means of reproduction it does exist. So in their case the process is actually controlled or governed by the situation they are surviving, means the situation they are in. If the environment is suitable enough, they always go for any of the asexual means of reproduction, but the situation whenever it changes to adverse, immediately sexual reproduction is triggered. Okay, each and every other feature will be discussed separately in a different video. Thank you.